My name is Peter Robinson, and today I'm going to walk through the process that a national team lead, an NTL, takes when they assist in the updating of a national conservation practice standard. In this scenario, I was asked by the National Water Management Engineer to serve as a national team lead for the 482 mold drain practice standard. I received an email that was generated by the QAT tool that indicated that the NDL for water management, Bill Rec in this scenario, has started the practice standard update process and is now ready for me, the national team lead, to begin work. I've assembled a team, the Interdisciplinary Review and Development Team, or IRDT, to help me with this task. In this scenario, the NTL, the national team lead, will be the person who makes the edit in the document. So I'm going to be making the edits. Our goal today is to review the comments given to us by the National Discipline Lead, make the edits needed to update the standard, and send it back to the NDL, the National Discipline Lead, for approval. After approval by both the NDL and the Quality Assurance Team, the draft practice standard will be sent to the states for a 45-day review period. Our team has decided that we will do the editing of the practice standard using the QAT tool's editing features. So the first thing I want to do is look at my email and click the link. Now, I've kind of jump-started this process, and so what you should be seeing on the screen is the QAT tool, and specifically what myself as a national team lead sees when I have been assigned a practice standard. So the first thing I want you to look at is there are three panes. On the left-hand pane, the very top, we see My Searches, and then assignments. And you can see that number to the right of the word assignments, 1, which means I have one assignment. Then in the center pane, you can see that assignment, which is the 482 practice standard. And in the right-hand pane, you can see a preview. So all of these panes you can size and resize if you want to make the information more visible or less visible. And so that's the first thing I'm going to do, is I'm going to look at the assignments pane, the center pane, and I'm going to expand it just so I can see what information is here. You can also use the scroll bar if you'd like. So I can see that this 482 practice standard, and let's look at the name. I'm going to expand the name a little bit so I can make sure it's got the right year. Yes, it says Mold Drain 2018. The year should be in the file name, so I know that I'm working on the correct one. It was routed to me. And let's see, I'm going to shrink this down a little bit. I'm working on a laptop today, so my real estate's pretty valuable. The last modifier is Bill Rec. As you remember, Bill Rec in this scenario is a National Water Management Engineer, and he has assigned me this document. Now, the next thing I want to do is, and this is kind of a trick, it's in the lower portion of the left-hand pane, there are two tabs. One is called Workspace and one is called CPS Management. Now, when this QAT tool opens, you're not going to be able to see those two. So what you do is you look down at the very bottom of this pane, and I understand this arrow is not the most obvious arrow, but this can be some very good information for you. So I'm going to click this arrow again here, and I'm going to first look at the CPS Management tab here. It opens up a new window, and on the very left, and this is what I want you to focus on just right now, it tells you all your permissions. Now, your permissions almost certainly will be different from anyone else's, or certainly from mine, based on just the fact of what roles you've been assigned in this whole process. So you can verify that you are part of, for example, in this case, I'm part of the 482-2017 IRD team. So I have the permissions to actually go in and do the editing. So if you don't have those permissions, you're going to have to go to the SharePoint site and sign up. Now the second tab is called the Workspace tab, and that's what I'm going to click, and that really brings us back to that opening screen. So there's two, and what I use that CPS Management for, at least initially, is just to verify that I have the permissions I think I have before I get too far and then realize, oh, I can't make this particular change because I don't have the permissions. All right. So now I think I'm ready to begin. I'm going to open up this 482 practice standard that Bill Rec, the National Water Management Engineer, assigned to me, and I'm going to look at the comments. So what I do is I will click on the file name, and you can see it highlights that whole line. And then here's the thing to remember. You want to check this out. Now, there's a couple ways to do it, but the most obvious way is to look on the screen in the upper right-hand corner, and you see these two file bins, one with an arrow going down and one with an arrow going up. If you hover over those icons, you will see one says check in and the other says check out. So I'm going to check this one out. And this will now open up this practice standard in what Quark is calling a Smart Documents tool. And this is where I can edit it. Once again, we have three panes. On the left-hand side, we see the setup, where these are different headings, and you can see the hierarchy of this particular file. It's not a Word file anymore, it's a Quark file, and it's our practice standard for mold drain. In the center pane, we can see all the text, which is our job as national team lead and the development team to edit this text and to update the mold drain practice standard for, in this case, 2018. And on the right-hand side, you see a preview of what that document is actually going to be look like when it's published. That is to say, when we release it. All right. So the fact that the center pane has some words in it, it doesn't necessarily show you the formatting that we're going to see, but the right-hand preview pane will show you that. So the first thing I want to do is I want to review the comments that Bill Reck, the National Water Management Engineer, sent to me. So for this, I'm going to go over to the right pane. Now, you can see that in the center pane, there are some words. For example, the word purpose has got that red box around it, and it looks like Bill has done some editing in the purpose section of the practice standard. But what I want to do is I want to look at all of them. So on the right-hand side, I can see there's tabs Preview, Comments, and Review. So let's look at comments first. And you can see that Bill has added 2 comments. This is a good way to make sure you're not missing anything, because you could just not scroll down all the way. But this is going to list all the comments that Bill Reck, the National Water Management Engineer, made. And those are pretty much instructions to the national team lead and the development team as his concerns and his comments about how to improve this standard and make it relevant for 2018. Now, the tab I really like to use is Review, and the reason I like to use Review is because it has not just the comments, but also the places where someone else has inserted text. So you can see that before there were 2 comments, but in fact there are 3 blocks here. The middle block is where Bill Reck inserted some comments. So I have now read those comments, and I've kind of made sense of them, and what I want to do is now act on them. So I'm going to go to the middle pane, and you can see, and this is very important, you can see that there is a blue highlight around all of the text beginning with definition. And what that means is that you cannot edit it unless you ask to edit it. So that is locked. And I promise you, if you don't remember this, you're going to be very frustrated and you're going to think, I don't have the permissions, something's wrong. But in fact, what you have to do is you have to go over to the the left-hand pane where you see the definition, the word definition. So I'm going to go over to the left-hand pane and focus on definition. Then I right-click and I say edit. That just gives me a comment about the document. I'm going to say OK, click OK. And now you can see that that text, including the word definition, does not have that blue highlight. It's just white. That means I can edit it. So that's very, very important. Remember to do that. Now, this is an editing tool. So once I've made sure that I can edit the document, let's take a look. Again, I'm in the center pane of some of the tabs. Now, the tab that I'm in right now is the Home tab. And you can see that at the top of the center pane. There are 2 other tabs that I want to review, but let's look at the Home tab first. The Home tab is essentially an editing tab, editing tool. So you can see, for example, there's the bold and the italics, and there are things like that. You can indent, and there's even a spell checker. So that's where you can do some editing. The second tab is Insert, and this, for example, I'll just highlight this one. This is where you can insert an image, and then you have special characters. So if you do want to put, not necessarily in a practice standard, but if you have a special character, for example, in a formula, you might want to use this. And then the third tool, or the third tab, is the Review tab, and this is where we can do our adding our comments or deleting our comments or things like that. Now, my philosophy, Bill Reck has asked our team to review this. I'm not going to delete Bill's comments because I want to make sure that Bill gets them back and see that we've either ignored them, hopefully not, or acted on them, and that's really our goal, is to act on these comments. And if we don't agree or we can't reach consensus, we can send another comment back to our National Discipline Lead, Bill Reck. So let's look at the first comment, and I'm going to run through this very quickly because, in fact, I'm sure most of you really aren't interested in our thought process for updating the mold drain practice standard. But that first comment says, let's do this as bullets. So you will notice that I actually can't do anything right now because the purpose section is also in blue. So what I'm going to do is I go over on the left-hand pane to the purpose section, I right-click, I find Edit, I see that comment again, and now that section is white, meaning that I can edit it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click in front of the two. I'm going to go to the Home tab where I have all my editing tools. Remember, there's 3 tabs, but the Home tab is the one you're probably going to use most. And then over here, I do have a Insert Remove Bullet list. So there we go. Now here, I want to make sure that I react to the National Discipline Lead's comment about suggest new wording, and our team has decided rather than using the word trapped, we're going to use the word excess water. Okay, excess water is actually a term that comes from the resource concern, probably more appropriate for the purpose. So I'm just going to click. Now this is much like Word. You can click, and I'm just going to type the word excess, and you can see where that excess now is in blue, the trapped is crossed out. Now, I've discussed this with the National Discipline Lead about how he would prefer to receive all these comments and all these changes. And in this case, the National Discipline Lead would like to see all the changes that we make. So at the end, I could, if I wanted to, I could clean up the document and just accept all the changes. But the National Discipline Lead wants to see what actual changes we have made as a team. So I'm just going to leave it like this. I'm not going to try to accept or reject any changes. So now then, when the National Discipline Lead looks at this, they'll know exactly what changes I made. Now there's a couple other things that I want to check. So let's see. We've already looked at the first 2 comments. We've made the purpose bulleted, and then we've suggested Bill Reck wanted new wording, and we did that. So let's add, at the very end, there's another comment. Oh, and look, for references, there are no references. So I have looked up a reference for this in the engineering field handbook, and I'm going to add that. Now you can see it's blue, so I can't do anything until I go over to references and right-click and say Edit. That comment, I click OK. Now that references section is now ready for editing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to place my cursor here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to Word document where I already have prepared this, this particular reference. So I select it. I can copy it. Now, copy and paste, you can copy in Word any way you like. I typically do it Control-C. But once you get to the Word, to the tool, and I need to open the correct window, there is no paste. So if you've copied something from Word, the way to paste it is Control-V. That command is not going to be available on the screen anywhere, but if you know it, Control-V, when I say Control-V, it should just put it right in. So I have now reacted to the comments of the National Discipline Lead. But I'm not necessarily done because perhaps I want to go in and in fact, I know the team will want to do this, and our team has done this in this scenario. We have reviewed this, and there's actually a wording change we want to make up in the criteria section. So I'm going to go to the criteria section, and lo and behold, it's in blue. So I have to go over I have to right-click in the left-hand pane. I right-click on the word criteria, and I say Edit. Right. Now what happens is I can edit this section called the criteria section. I have completely rewritten this location, grade, and length section, and I've put it into active voice. So I'm going to pick that up from Word. I can select it. Control-C will copy it out of Word, but you don't have to use Control-C. You can go up to the menu in Word. However, in the tool itself, we've got to go over and we've got to, I'm going to select this whole thing, and now the only way to paste it is to Control-V. All right? Now, it looks like I did too much, so I'm going to use Control-Z. That's an undo. I actually didn't want to get rid of the location, grade, and length, so I'm going to go back over here, and now I'm going to Control-V, and you can see I might have a slight problem with spaces, but we're going to let that be for right now. Now, the next thing I want to cover is what if you wanted to add another heading to this practice standard document. Now, one of the most important ways and the most important headings would be additional criteria. So let's look at how we're going to add additional criteria in that section. Now, you could just think, well, I'm just going to type in additional criteria, but here's what we suggest that you do. We're going to strongly suggest that you use the tool and you're going to add that heading. So for this, I need to go over to the left-hand side of my document. And that's the left-hand pane. Up at the top, right under the word Smart Document, you can see Show Add Section Options. Right? And that expands, under criteria, it expands these headings that are now available. And I'll expand the left-hand pane a little bit so you can see more of what it's actually telling us it can do. You can see add additional criteria, add heading 3, add heading 4. So if I wanted to add an additional criteria here, I can do this. Now, on my laptop, this is getting a little bit crowded. So I want to show you how I can close certain panes and make them visible and then invisible. And that's an icon that appears in the upper right-hand corner. It looks like a table. So if I bring my mouse up to the upper right-hand corner, I can click on this, and it says Show Left Pane and Show Right Pane. And if you click them, then you see them. If you unclick them, then you don't see them. Now, my experience is as soon as I say I don't want to see the right pane, then I need the right pane. But it's easy to make it visible and invisible. Right now, I need a little bit more space, so I'm going to say Show Right Pane. When I say I'm going to unclick the checkbox on Show Right Pane, and that goes away now. So now I have a little bit more space. So I want to show you what happens when I add additional criteria. Now, all I have to do is click here, and it adds that heading down at the bottom. All right. Now, if I want to move something from above, I can do the copy-paste, but this will add that to the bottom, and this is actually very important for how these practice standards are set up. So if you are adding additional criteria, make sure you use this feature. Now, as I said before, all of a sudden I do want to see the right-hand pane, and the reason I want to see the right-hand pane is that we can do a quick preview. So I'm going to have to, well, in fact, let's unclick Show Left Pane and click Show Right Pane, and then I click off here. Now I can see this the preview of this document. Now, if you remember in the right pane before, I was showing you how to look at the comments and the review of this particular document, but now I'm going to be looking at the preview. Again, I need a little bit more space, so I'll just expand it here, and then I can click on preview, but it's already selected, so I don't really need to do that. And then let's see, I really need this to be a little bit bigger, so I'm going to make it bigger, and you can, just looking at the headings, you can see, hey, wait a second, I added additional criteria and it's not showing up on my preview. Where is it? Well, there is a refresh button, and that refresh button is in the upper left-hand corner of the right-hand pane, and it looks just like you would expect it to look. It's that arrow that's going in a circular motion. So I'm going to hover over it first. It's not telling me that it's a refresh, but in fact it's refresh. So I will click on it. It will refresh this, and hopefully now it will see the changes that I've made. And now you can see, try to make this a lot bigger. Now you can see that in fact it did add additional criteria for, and there's no text in there because I didn't add anything. So that's how you can add headings. Now, with the exception of additional criteria, which is very important, the formatting on these things is kind of interesting. You can make changes that you think are happening in the Word document, the editing tool of the Quark, of the editing section of the Quark tool, but just make sure that you look at what you're actually doing from time to time, because you can do a lot of formatting that's actually not going to take, or like probably not a lot, but some formatting will not actually take based on the way that we want these practice standards to look, and we don't want to give people absolute control, particularly about the headings. Now, if you did want to bold something or italicize something, that will work, all right? But just be aware that if you do use those add headings, do a preview to see what you've actually done. All right. And here's an example. In this case, where I added this meet the requirement for the location, grade, and length, you can see where I actually added a space there, that is to say a carriage return or a new paragraph, and that actually does show up in the preview. So I might want to go back and I want to change this. I don't want this particular session to be a lesson in all the nuances of editing in this tool. I think that you're going to be able to figure it out fairly quickly. It's fairly straightforward. But I did want to send this back now to Bill Reck, our National Discipline Lead. I've got a couple more things I want to do. I just want to give Bill an indication that I have made a change in criteria, and it's right here. This is where I want to say, and now how do I do this? Well, I need to go over to, I'm in the Center tab, the Editing tab. I need to go over to Review, the Review tab up top, and then I'm going to click on this icon, which the hint tells me it's add comment. That's exactly what I want to do. I want to add a comment here, and I'm going to say rewritten for active voice. And I also just want to make sure that it's clear that I convey this message to the National Discipline Lead that no change in meaning is intended. So I didn't actually try to change the criteria. I just tried to reword it, and that's kind of my comment. So I want to make sure that everyone agrees with me that the meaning of this phrase was not changed. Sometimes you don't intend to change the meaning, but that would be an appropriate comment, I would think, to our National Discipline Lead. So after all of these things, and you might be editing this for an hour or two, but I'm going to say that all our editing is done. And now what I want to do is I want to save and close. Now, obviously, up top, you can see a couple options. Discard changes. If I said discard changes, that's actually that we're just going to throw away all the changes I've made since I opened or since the last save. That's not what I want to do right now. What I want to do is I want to save and close. So I'm going to go up here to the Save and Close menu, and I'm going to click on that. And it should open a window. And you'll notice it says Check-in. The top left-hand corner of the window says Check-in. So let's look at these things. I want to send this back to Bill Reck. So let's look at some of the data that this is providing. The file name is correct. I was working on the right file. That's always reassuring. The status. Let's check the status. Hey, I can't change it because it's going to be a pre-QAT draft until the National Discipline Lead approves it. Now, who do I want this to go to? I want this not to myself. Since myself as a national team lead and our team is done and with this particular step in the whole process, I want to send this back to the National Discipline Lead where he can either approve or reject the suggestions we made for change. So that route 2 is very important to make sure you send it to the right person. And I know that Bill Reck, he's listed under William here, William Reck, so I just select him. And now when I click on the Save button down here, it should save. It should add this assignment to Bill Reck's assignment list. It should also send an email to Bill Reck letting him know. So he doesn't have to check this daily. He'll just look in his inbox in Microsoft Outlook, find that there is work for him to do on this particular standard, and he can go and complete his task, which is the next step, where the National Discipline League will have to approve or reject the changes that the team has suggested. That concludes this task.
Hello again, this is Bill Reck, and this is the next step in our tutorial on the process of editing or revising National Conservation Practice Standards. So we're currently at a step that we just finished. The step that we're on, the national team lead, Peter Robinson, just finished editing the draft of our standard we're working on, mold drain, prior to our quality assurance step. As team lead, Peter made changes to the document, left some changes in there that so that I, as the National Discipline League, could go in and review them prior to submittal to the quality assurance team. That's the next step. After he routed it on to me, I got an email, and that's what you see here is a copy of the email that I got. And it basically says the document's been assigned to you, it's mold drain, and it's from Peter Robinson. He's the last person to do it. And from that, I'll know that this is an email letting me know that I need to go and check on what Peter's done here. Notice that there is an email to see the standard. Click here, and that provides a link to directly to mold drain. So something I've noticed that I'll just pass on to you real quick. If you click here and it pops up and gives you an error and wants you to log in, that's it. What it's done is this link has gone to the website without you having an e-authentication access to it yet. So if you run into that, what I found works is if you just go to your link to the practice, click that, go through eAuth first, and then click this link. It'll take you to where you want to be, and we'll see if we can't get that fixed. All right. So for now, click here, and I've already logged in today. And so it knew that I've got access, and it put me right in. So when I clicked the link, it took me to the collection or the folder directly for mold drain, the 2018 version that we're working on, and there I am. If I was to check assignments, it would also show up in my assignments list that I've got mold drain is one of my current assignments. All right. So since Peter's routed it on to me, I'm going to pull it up and I'm going to check out the draft and look at what Peter's sent me. So the view that I like to go to is, we've got the three panels. The left is our links to the different parts of the standard. If you click on any of these, it'll take you directly to that part. The center is where we're working on it, and then the right is the preview pane. So at this point, I want to take a look at what the review comments were. Over here over the review pane, you'll see preview comments, where these are the listing of the comments, and the review. This has everything that's in there. So I'm going to look and see, first of all, if there's any comments that Peter sent me. And So there's a comment that I left. Here's a comment in general criteria that Peter left, and it says rewritten for active voice, no change in meaning is intended. And the last one is in reference to section is one that I left. So I'll come back through and start doing some looking. And the purposes section, when I hover over it here, this is where I've left a comment. I can see that Peter has changed some wording here. And here's what I had put in earlier, suggest new wording. I need to clean this up before I send it on to quality assurance. So I want to go to the review section. And these were turned, using a track changes type function in Cork. And I want to go through and accept some of these changes. So the trapped and the excess, both of those are correct. I want to keep those. So up here at the top in the review tab, there's two icons here. One is for accept, one is for reject. I'm going to click the accept, and it's going to say accept change or accept all changes in the document. I'm just going to accept just the single change. And where to go? I should have accepted it. Oh, you know what? This section is blue, so that's good to remember. The reason that no changes occurred is because, remember, that when each of these sections are turned a certain color, if they're blue, you can't edit them. Because this section of the document is actually its own document, and this is just the way that the system is set up is it's showing you what's in this document. So in order for me to edit this purpose section for mold drain, I've got to turn on the edit function. So I'll come over here and turn on the edit function, and it's now white. So when that happens, I'm now able to edit, and it will edit both here in the standard and also the purpose document that we have set up. It will edit that one at the same time, so both documents are edited. And the reason we do that is because some of these sections, we're going to reuse those in other places so that when we update this document, it will automatically update other documents that are also linked to this purposes section. Okay, so let's try it again. Highlight the section that I want to accept, come up to the top, click the accept button, accept the change. Now it's gone. So the change was accepted and trapped became excess. This next piece here, suggest new wording, that's a little note that I was sending to Peter, and that's obviously not something that I want to keep in the text. That's something I need to reject. So I want to come in here and click reject, reject change. And that's gone. Something else that you may or may not want to do, this purposes comment that's in here, the purposes don't actually show up in the preview. They're not going to show up in our final document. If you zoom in here, there's no comment that's in the document. So I could leave that purpose there and it's not going to actually hurt anything. I could also, delete the comment and get rid of the clutter, and that's what I'm going to do is because I want to see that I've gone through and addressed everything. And if there's any comments that I want to leave in the file, I'll do that in my documentation file. In that documentation file, if there's any comments that I want to leave for future discipline leads to come back and look at why were these changes made, that's where I want them, not in the actual standard itself. So I'm going to come in here to comments. Peter, let's do this as bullets. He did that. I'm satisfied. And here I'm just going to remove the comment. So notice that it's now gone. All right, I'm going to move on to our criteria section. And I noticed that Peter has, again, okay, here's blue. Let's turn the blue edit it so it's turned white. Start off doing that. And I noticed that in here, I don't see any track changes. And so let's just talk about that for a second. In order to get the changes tracked, when Peter was in here, the tracking has to be on, and it must have been off for this section when he was looking at it. So one of the things that you could do is you can go back, and if you've missed some comments and you want to see them, there's a way that I'll show you in a few minutes where you can go back and look at earlier versions of the document. And so I'll show you how to do that. So if you're not quite sure what change was made and you want to go back and see, there is a way that you can go back and look and do some comparison. All right, I'm looking at it, and I want to get rid of the comment because he's just telling me it was written in active voice. Okay. I read through the section. I'm happy with it. So let's see. I'm going to get rid of that, and then let's accept that. And down here at the bottom, I have the references section, and I want to get rid of that comment as well. So I'm going to come in here and delete the comment. Now you can make other changes. If you want to see a little bit more about how to edit this standard and how to go about adding in different pieces, I would suggest you go review Peter's part that he shows you how the national team lead goes about editing the document. All right, I've gotten the document like I want it. It's ready for our quality assurance step. If I want to get a look at what the standard looks like, I can look in the preview pane. If there's changes in here that you made over here that it looks like they're not there, you can click on the refresh button, and it'll refresh the document for you. All right, so once I've got it like I want it, I'm going to hit save and close. And at this point, it's ready to move on to the next step, which is the QAT. Now, notice over here, you know, it's kind of grayed out. There is a watermark in here that says pre-QAT draft. And that watermark will stay on that document until it changes to a new point in the process. And that's what I'm fixing to do here. I'm going to say ready for QAT, initial draft. I'll click there. And notice that my routed to automatically changed to the quality assurance team CPS. You can check the metadata and checklist down here. If there's anything that's in here that needs to be completed before the next step, if you've got, you know, some of these are in here and have to be filled out prior to the document going to the Federal Register or prior to the document being released to the NHCP. If you're at one of those steps where something's required and you hit save and it doesn't go anywhere, check here, because it's likely that one of these boxes may have a red ring around it, and that's there to tell you that that's a block that you need to fill out. So I'm ready. I'm going to hit save, and there it goes. So what happens after that point is several things happen. First of all, it checked in all the documents. Notice those check marks are gone. It checked in all those documents. They're routed to. It had been routed to me. Now the routed to document is to the quality assurance team. An email, the system just sent an email to our quality assistance team members, alerting them that they have a new assignment that's arrived, and that is something for them to review, this mold drain standard. Notice that when I highlight and look at the preview for the practice, notice that my watermark has changed. It now says ready for QAT initial draft. So something I promised you a minute ago was that I'd show you how to get to previous versions if you'd like to see a previous version. If you right-click on a standard and then come down here to View Revisions, if you click on that, it'll give you the opportunity to go back and see previous versions of the standard, or the document, whatever document it is that you're working on. So if I wanted to go back and see what it was prior to Peter touching it, I could go to see Peter was, touched it here in version 3. Version 2 was the last time that I looked at it. Prior to that, I could click there and click on read only. You don't want to revert because that would change the standard back to that point. And you could go review or read only that document and look at it and be able to see what the document was prior and look at those areas that you may have questions about. All right, at that point, we've come to the end of this segment. Where the document has gone next will be to the quality assurance team. What happens in the quality assurance team is we have a couple technical editor types. They're going to, one of them within a couple week time frame will look at the standard. They have a set of things that they look for in the standard that they change, not from a technical nature, but just from a editorial, formatting, that kind of standpoint. It's a technical writing editing step, not a technical editing step, because those folks are not technical in nature. They will go through and they'll do things like make sure that you meet the Plain Language Act criteria, which means that the standard is written appropriately, written in the active voice, not in the passive voice. They'll look and make sure that your references are, meet agency criteria in terms of how the references are formatted. And there's a few other things that they typically look for, like how we say, conservation practice standard so-and-so with a code. People do that in a different way. We want that consistent, and so they have a consistent way that'll be put in there. So those are some of the types of comments that I'll tell you that I've gotten so far when I've sent my standards for a quality assurance review step. After they've done the review step, they will route that back to you as the National Discipline Lead. And when they do that, we're not going to show you, we're not going to have a training video for showing you how the quality assurance team does it, because there's only a couple people that do that, and there's no reason for us to provide video training to everybody on that. The next step that we're going to go to, we'll pick it up at the point where the quality assurance team has done their editing and sent it back to the National Discipline Lead, and that will be the step, their last review prior to assigning the document as ready for the internal review. So that brings us to the end of this segment.